Well, we've been talking for a couple of weeks now about the stress that we all deal with in our lives, that stress from margin-less living, that stress that comes from when we don't have enough money at the end of the month, when we don't have enough time for our kids, when we don't have enough resources to do the things that we got to do, that stress that comes on all of us. And the answer that we need really is margin in our lives, margin, the space for God to work. So this series, we've been doing it for a couple of weeks, got one more week after today, and I hope it's been good for you. I've really enjoyed it. I've heard so much feedback from a lot of people talking about how it's spurring discussion in our families, in our life groups, even among neighbors and stuff, about how we can deal better with the stresses that we have by creating godly margin in our lives. In fact, I want to make sure we understand what it is we're talking about. So grab your note sheet. I hope you're going to follow along and take notes today, or your digital notes. And let's kind of look at the definition of margin once again. Margin is the amount available beyond what is necessary. First blank on your page. Margin is the amount available beyond what is necessary. And I believe God works in the margins. You hear me? I really believe God works in the margins. I really believe that if you want to hear God speak, if you really want to tune into God and what He wants to do in your life, you will learn to be still and know that He is God. Right? I mean, it's hard to hear the still small voice of God when you are madly scrambling on your way to work, just trying to get there on time, and angry at the other people on the road slowing you down. Am I right? Hard to hear the voice of God in that time. Hard to hear the voice of God when you're just trying to wrangle and wrestle your kids into submission for 5 seconds, right? It's just hard. It's hard to do that when you're just always running, always moving. I believe God works in the margins. So I've seen this in my own life. I might have a little bit of workaholism. I'm not sure. I don't feel like I'm a workaholic because I don't love to work. I just have more to do than I can ever get done. And I feel like I've been talking about it a lot this last couple of weeks. And what happens is when you talk about it, that's when you really deal with it. So I don't know how it's been for you as we've been talking about it, but for me, this week may have been the week of least margin in my recent memory. It's just been crazy all the time, giant disasters, working from early till late, just trying to keep our heads above water with some of the crises that are going on, and just non-stop crazy. Anybody else had that this past week or two? Yeah, it's been just crazy for me and for my family. It's been crazy here in our office and everything because of all that. And so I might have a little of that disease, though. I might have a little bit of that workaholism. I'm not sure, because I always feel like I've got more to do than time to do it. So I feel like I'm always working. And when my kids were younger, I recognized this about myself. I recognized that I didn't always have the time that they needed me to have. And so one of the decisions we made as a family is my wife and I decided that we would buy this little pop-up camper. So we bought this little camper because Steve don't take vacations, right? Steve just never has time to take a vacation. And I just felt like if we have a little camper, it'll sort of force me into taking a week here and there to go be with the family and to go camping. And so we bought this little bitty pop-up camper, and I'll never forget. We had not been on a family vacation, I don't know, ever, maybe, and the kids were elementary school aged. And so I scheduled a week to go away and go camping with the family. And so we packed up the camper, packed up the car, got everything loaded, hitched up and everything, and we go driving off to Cloudland Canyon. Anybody ever been to Cloudland Canyon? Yeah, beautiful canyon up about an hour and a half from here. Beautiful place, one of Georgia's best kept secrets. And we spent a week there. We decided to spend a week there camping. So we pull in and we park in the West Rim campground, and I remember the kids got out of the car and they're running around and playing, So I crank down the stands on the camper and get ready to unhitch, and I look at my wife, and I said to her, I've got the place scheduled for 6 days. I said, but if we can make it to 3, I'll consider it a success. Because I don't know you, and I don't know them, and I don't know this is going to work. So besides, I got work. So I really didn't know if we were going to make it. And so I unhitched, and before I even knew what happened, 6 days had gone by. I mean, we just got to spend quality time with the family, and we didn't have, the internet, everything back then, and we just were separated from it all, and I just got to focus in on my children. And so we spent the next several years, every year, twice a year, taking a week and just getting in that camper somewhere, whether it was Cloudland or whether it was Hunting Island, South Carolina, or wherever it might have been. And to this day, my kids have been out of the house now for years. And to this day, we say that our family's best memories are around that camper. We were able to use that camper as a vehicle to help us put that big rock in first, to get that family time right. And I might not have gotten it all right, but we were able to really create that. We have coffee table books now from some of those camping trips that we have at home, and we'll just leaf through those and remember those good times. Really, really good. And today I want to talk about that big rock in financially. I want to talk about financial stress that we have. We've talked about time, scheduling, margin, and all that, but now I want to talk today about financial margin. And I want to just kind of do an experiment. I'm going to ask you if you'll just be willing for 1 second to be bold with me. Are you willing to be bold with me for a second? Are you willing to be boldly honest with me for 1 second? Okay, so I'm going to ask you a question, and I just need you to respond to me. If you, in your life, I'm just going to ask you to be bold and honest. If you in your life have ever experienced financial stress, would you raise your hand with me? Okay, hold them up. Look around. Right? Everybody look around. Who hasn't, right? Okay, you can put your hands down. All of us deal with financial stress. It's normal for people to deal with financial stress. Everybody deals with it in one way or another. But just because it's normal doesn't mean it's good, am I right? I mean, financial stress is the number one problem that creates mental and emotional issues for us. Financial stress is the number one killer of marriages. Financial stress threatens your children's future, and it threatens your dreams and hopes for who and where you want to be financially in the future. And all of us deal with it. It's normal. It's okay. I mean, all of us have debt that we can't pay. All of us have bills that we have trouble keeping up with. All of us deal with worry and anxiety and fear when it comes to money. Most of us have tension in our marriage over money because it's normal. The problem is normal is killing us. Normal is threatening our marriages, threatening our kids, and this normal thing, this financial stress thing, it's the single thing that keeps us the most disobedient to God. Normal is killing us. Normal isn't working. So why are you okay with it? I mean, it's normal, and it's killing us. Why are we okay with it? Why do we live as if normal was okay, was to be expected, was to be what we should live? Because Scripture calls us out of the normal, doesn't it? God desires and has designed something much more for us than normal. Proverbs is so full of wisdom, and in Proverbs 21 it says this, it says, precious treasure and oil are in a wise man's dwelling, but a foolish man devours it. Let me translate this into our language here today. The wise man has got a surplus. You hear me? The wise man has got a surplus. It doesn't say the wealthy man. It doesn't say the born into money man. It doesn't say that the person who has the biggest salary. It says the wise man has a surplus. But a foolish man lives paycheck to paycheck. The foolish man spends everything he gets. The wise man has got a cushion, but the foolish man devours it. The wise man lives with margin, but the foolish man blows it all. Right? You know what I'm talking about, right? You know some people that seem to have it all, seem to live in the biggest house and have all the nicest stuff. I've got a friend who, you would think he's got it all going on because he's got a beautiful, large Florida house with a gorgeous blue pool in the back. And he's got big dogs running around and new cars and, just beautiful, lives in a beautiful, beautiful, large house neighborhood, and he's got it all going on financially, right? But last year, his wife left him because of the tension over finances, because there was so much debt in the house, they were always fighting and keeping up. He has the appearance on the outside of being well-to-do, but really there was great turmoil and stress going on due to lack of margin. I got another friend who is not that way. I got another friend who I go to his house, and the yard's not the most manicured. It's not the nicest everything. Their cars are old like mine. They're older cars. And they don't have it all. But man, I walk in that house and that family's connected. There is peace. There is happiness. There is joy. And I love being around them because they got something more, something better, something that is not normal going on. The wise man has margin, but the foolish man lives paycheck to paycheck, spends it all. Paul was writing to his apprentice Timothy, and he says this. He says, true godliness with contentment is itself great wealth. I want to make sure we see this here. True godliness, trusting Jesus, living your life the way He's called you to live, being the person that He has designed for you to be. True godliness with contentment. Man, when you're living a life of faith, a life of trust, knowing that His plan is better than your plan, boy, it brings a lot of contentment. When you're living on His purpose, for His much better, for His not normal, boy, it brings a lot of peace that passes all understanding. True godliness with that kind of contentment, that level of contentment, is itself great wealth. Right? That is great wealth. He goes on and he says, after all, we brought nothing with us when we came into the world, and we can't take anything with us when we leave it. So if we have enough food and clothing, let us be content. If we have enough food and clothing and that big truck and those nice tools and that better house and the purebred dogs that we want and all the stuff that everybody else has and that big TV, if we have all that, then I'll be content. Isn't that the way we are? Isn't that the way we are? But we brought nothing and we're going to leave with nothing, so let us be content. But people who long to be rich, who long to have all that other stuff, they fall into temptation and are trapped. They're trapped. They are trapped by many foolish and harmful desires that plunge them into ruin. They get into a place where there's no margin, and the stress, the turmoil, the pain, and ruin and destruction. For the love of money is the root of all kinds of... I'm going to say it again. The love of money is the root of all kinds of... Okay, now I want to be clear. It doesn't say that money is evil. My prayer for you is that you'll have money, that you'll have more money than you have. I hope you pray for me to have more money. I want more money. Don't you? Yeah. Money's not evil, but the love of money, the pursuit of money, the never-ending Spending of money is the root of all evil. And some people craving money have wandered from the true faith and have pierced themselves with many sorrows. Yeah, godliness with contentment equals wealth. That's what Paul says. That's not what our world says. It says more. Happiness, wealth is more. I don't really care what you have because you're not wealthy now, but the definition of wealthy is having just more. More. The definition of having wealth, having happiness, having contentment is having more. And when do you ever arrive at more? Never. So you're always chasing something you'll never reach. No wonder you're stressed. No wonder it's causing turmoil in your life. You're always chasing something you're never going to be able to put your hands on. Ariana Grande. Y'all know who that is? I didn't know who that was. I don't care. Did I say it that way? But she's done something this week that has not been done ever since the Beatles. She, this past week, has the top 3 songs on the Billboard charts. Number 1, number 2, and number 3 simultaneously. Nobody's done that since the Beatles. And one of their top hits was Can't Buy Me Love. I didn't know anything about Ariana Grande, so I just said, well, I'm going to find out who she is and what she sings about. And I listened to some of her stuff. And she says the way to find love and happiness is through buying the right shoes. Right? Can't buy me love versus buy me the shoes, and then I'll be happy. Our culture says it's about more. It's about reaching harder and longer and farther. You just got to get the right. You just got to get the bling. You just got to get the shoes. You just got to have more. And you'll never be able to have it all. And we feel like our problem, you and I, right now, this morning, in these 4 walls, we think that the problem is, well, I have an income problem. I don't make enough money. Right? I don't make enough money. I don't have enough. I need to figure out a way to make more money. And we think that our problem is an income problem. The reason there's stress, the reason there's tension, the reason my wife and I fight, the reason I never can get away, the reason we don't have what we think we need is because I have an income problem. But that's a lie from the pit of hell. Because let's face it, next blank on your page, this is a spiritual problem. This is a spiritual problem. The problem isn't that we have an income problem. The problem is that we're trying to find happiness in things that will never give us happiness. We're trying to find our joy in things that will never fully bring us joy. We're looking for love in all the wrong places, right? We have a spiritual problem. Jesus told us, don't store up for yourselves treasures here on this earth, because what happens to these treasures? Yeah, moth and rust destroy them. Man, the best cars, the biggest houses, the nicest clothes, the newest cell phone, the most bling, I mean, it's all very, very temporary. It doesn't last. No matter how good it looks, how well it's built, how excellent it's engineered, it's just temporary. It's moth and rust destroy these things. Jesus says, don't store treasures up here in this world, but put your treasure in heaven. Store up treasure in heaven and let your heart be there. Jesus is telling us that where our treasure is, that's where our heart is, right? Where we really build value, that's where your heart is. Why are we always focusing on our income and our expenditures when we ought to be focused on God's much bigger, much better purpose for our lives? Do you want your heart all caught up in broken down, not to last things? Or do you want your life to be all about something bigger and better? Don't let your heart be here. Don't let your treasures be here. Don't make it a spiritual problem. But break that. Break that spiritual problem. You know, we know what the antidote is. We talk about it in church all the time. We know, everybody knows, that the antidote for selfishness is selflessness. The antidote for spending on yourself is giving, right? It's giving away. You know, that's the antidote. It breaks the back of the thing that traps us and keeps us all boxed in and head down, focused on the immediate. It breaks us out of this marginless existence when we give. Right? So we all like to talk about it. You know, we're good Christians. We're good Jesus followers. Right? So we all know the percentage, right? We all got to start with a percentage. And what's the percentage? Well, come on. What's the percentage? 10%. We all want to give 10%, right? You got to give your 10 to God, and then everything will be okay. But did you know that the average American doesn't give 10%? The average American Christian only gives 2%. The average American Christian gives 2%, and some of us more and some of us less. The average is 2%. And that tells me that 98% of our heart is the world's. Right? 98% of my heart belongs to the world, and I'm going to continue to have a spiritual problem. But don't worry, it's worse than that. Because not only is 98% of our heart the world's, we make excuses about it to God. You know, somehow we look at ourselves in the eyes, in the mirror, and we look at other Christians in the eyes, and we say, well, I don't make enough money to give. You know, I just don't have. I mean, by the time I gotta, pay my rent and pay my bills and buy groceries and feed the kids and the dogs and everything. By the time I do all that stuff, I just don't have any money left over. And if you remember, Jesus tells a story about this. Yeah, first of all, the money you have is a gift from God. It's not yours. It's a gift from God. And I'll be honest, God does not gift us all that way equally. Right? Some of us, He gives a lot, and some He gives a little. And Jesus tells a story about this. He's upfront about this. And He talks about how the master gives several servants varying amounts of money. Some get a lot, and some get a little. And the master gives the money to the servants and says to do what with it? To invest it for gain. Not the servant's gain. Whose gain is it? The master's gain. Invest it into the kingdom, my kingdom. Grow my kingdom. I'm running off on a trip. I'll be back later on. I'm coming back and I want to see how well you do. And so he comes back, and sure enough, the servant that was given a lot has invested it and has a great return. But then there's the excuse maker. The one who was given very little, who had just very little. The master says, what'd you do with it? Well, I didn't really know. I just didn't have enough to do much of anything, so I just kind of, did whatever I could with it, and I didn't invest anything, and there's no return. And the master, according to Jesus, looks at this excuse-making servant, this lying servant, and says, okay, I gave you what I gave you, but I guess you can't even deal with that. So what you've been given will be taken away from you and given to somebody who can do something for me. And you, excuse-making servant, are to be thrown out into the darkness. You're not even mine anymore. Why make excuses? When God has something incredible for you, He has something great for you. So what we do is we sit down with our checkbook. Do you still have checkbooks? Anybody still have a checkbook? I don't have a checkbook. I haven't written a check in a decade. So we sit down with our app on our phone or our computer, and we sit down with our pen and our paper, and we have our bills stacked up on the kitchen table, and we get, the spouse in there, and we're like, okay, we got to figure this out. We just got to figure it out. There's no margin. We're in a bad way. Let's figure it out. And so you look at your bills, you look at your income, and you and I know what the solution is, right? I'm going to tell you what the solution is. It's make more, spend less. right? Make more, spend less. And I know some of you guys are going, great, idiot, thanks. I got up early for that. Had that figured out first year of my marriage. What are you doing just now cluing in on that? I understand, but listen, that's what we think. We think the answer is to make more. Maybe I'll get a second job, or I'm holding out for that big promotion, or I think I'll get a raise, or whatever it is. I got to make more, and then in the process, spend less. That's what we think. But the problem, here's the big problem. If you look just at the real situation, here's the real situation. Most Americans aren't even breaking even now. Most Americans are literally upside down because most Americans actually spend 110% of their income. Most Americans spend more than we make. It's called debt, and it is a killer. So we spend more than we make. And so when you sit down to go through it and figure out what to do, this is the situation you'll look at. And so we think, okay, let's look at the answer. It's make more and spend less. So if we could just spend less, look, we've created margin right here by spending less. And oh, look, we've made more, so we've created more margin by making more. Now, this is a good situation. Now we'll have enough to give back to God. Now we'll have enough to do the things we want to do. Now we'll be able to whatever. Make more, spend less. But there it goes. The reality is that most of us don't actually want to make more, spend less. We actually want to make more, but keep spending the same. Spend the same, right? We're not really willing to sacrifice anything, right? We got what we think are the basics, what's barely basic for going on. So what we do is one day we finally make more. We get that promotion, we get that raise, we work that second job, and we make more. You just got to get ahead of me all the time, don't you, Jason? You just always got to get a little ahead of me. Give the answers away before. Golly, thanks. So we always make more, but you know the truth, and you already saw it, but spending always follows income, doesn't it? Spending always follows income. And what we do is we don't spend less. We end up, because you got the second job, so now you can afford those bigger car payments, right? Or now you can finally get that dream home with 3 bathrooms or 5 bathrooms or a big, long yard or whatever it is you want, right? And spending follows income. And then before you know what happens, you're right back in the same spot that every other American is in, spending more than they're getting. This is a spiritual problem because this marginless living happens no matter where this income level is. It's not an income problem, it's a spiritual problem. It's called sin. It's us saying that, God, I know that the end of the month is coming on Thursday. February 28th is coming up soon. And God, I know you want me to invest into your kingdom, invest for your return. And so, God, I know Thursday's coming. It's the end of the month. And so as long as I get my rent paid, my groceries paid, the kids fed, get the heating bill, all my stuff covered, then we'll see what happens on Thursday. And maybe on Thursday, if there's anything left over, I'll bring you into the game. I'll take care of all the stuff I think I need to do first. And then I'll bring you in with whatever's left over. Dude, that is exactly what sin is. That is exactly what broke us away from God in the first place. Destroyed our relationship with Him, made us treasonous criminals against God. We said us first. Not you, us. We want to serve ourselves, not you, God. We want to make this picture about me, not you. And that decision that human beings made and that you and I continue on a seemingly daily basis to make all the time, that is sin. And it puts us under the death penalty. There is a way that seems right to a man, but it only leads in death. Right? And so we're under the death penalty, separated from God. But God loved us so much that he did not want us to die separated from him. He wanted us with him forever, and he wanted us to experience his power and abundance here. And so rather than punish us the way we deserve to be punished, he chose instead to send his son, who came here to live with us and to love us, to show us the kingdom, and then to go to the cross where God the Father chose to punish Jesus instead of punishing you and me. He chose to punish his own son in my place. Jesus died so that you and I can live a whole new life. He died on the cross, and 3 days later he rose again, and he takes that new resurrected life and he brings it into me so that I can live a completely different, not normal life. But I can live a life of power and abundance that he calls me to. And I can only do that when I realize that none of this is about me. None of this, I'm not going to take any of it with me. I've only got it for a short period of time. And what that means is, next mic on your page, that I'm not the owner, I'm the steward. Right? I'm not the owner, I'm the steward. For whatever reason, even us Christians, we live our lives as if we were the owners. But in reality, we're just the stewards. So many parables of Jesus, so many instructions that he gives us are all about being servants to a greater kingdom, being a steward of what he's given you, time and resources, money, so that you'll make a difference in his kingdom, not yours, his. In other words, the steward is expected to take what he's been given, whether it's a lot or whether it's a little, take what you've been given and to trade it up. Right? To trade up. To invest for an increase in his kingdom. To invest on his purpose, to invest as part of the redemptive plan that God has to bring the world back to him, to seek first his kingdom and righteousness, invest for him, trade up. Christian, trade up. So why do you and I always seem to trade down? Why do we seem to always have a little and end up getting less out of it? It's not the way God designed us to be, excuse maker. He didn't design us to be like that, right? His word told us, and we looked at it last week, we'll look at it again in a minute, that he's designed us to live as a well-watered garden, an ever-flowing stream of water. The picture that he wants us to live, he talks about living water, and he wants us to live this flow. Oh yeah, this flow of this clear, clean, good water. He wants you and I to live in this flow, this overflow. This is the blessing of God pouring into and through you. He wants you to live like this. Hard illustration to do in a rainy week like this one. But this is how he expects us to live. He wants us to live full and overflowing with water, with his blessings, his kingdom blessings. If you invest in his kingdom, this is your life, overflowing with clear, refreshing water. But that's not the way we live. What we do instead is we want just a little dab of his blessings, just a little bit. And then we want to just wring out every last little drop of this increasingly dry, old rag. And we try to squeeze every last little thing out. We want to touch at God's blessings, but we really just try to live off of our own blessing. And no wonder we end up feeling dry and empty. It's because we're trying to live off of an increasingly dry rag that's worthless. He's giving us his blessings if we'll live his way, if we'll trade up. But instead, we keep going back to the rag. That's what we do. So he tells us this In Malachi 3, God is speaking to his people, the people of Israel, and he makes them a promise. Hold on, Jason, just don't put it up yet. Hold on. It's okay. I'll get there in just a minute. I promise. And he makes this promise to his people. And I want to remember for just a second that this is a promise not to me and you. It's an old covenant promise made to the nation of Israel. And it's about bringing your tithe. It's about bringing your 10%. Now, I don't believe you and I are under God's law of tithing, because you're no longer under law, you're under grace. And your law is a new law. Jesus says, a new law I give to you, a new command I give to you, and that command is to what? Love. Love. The law that we're under is love. And so he says, you don't give 10%, you give as you've been given to. So the law of love is much more demanding on us than the law of the 10%. There's just not a number assigned to it. Right? We give like we've been given to. We give out of a love response to God. So in other words, God's kind of telling us that I can tell how much you love me by how well you respond to me in your finances. So God's talking to the people of Israel, and they're under the 10% tithe law. And he's telling them that, hey, you've cheated me out of this. You're not giving me what I'm owed, because it was an owe-you kind of relationship then. And here's what he says. I want you to bring your tithe to me. I want you to get all the people of Israel, bring it to me. Bring it to the storehouse so that my temple will be full. And here's what he says. And this promise, it's not exactly a promise for me and you, but I do believe that this promise reveals the character and the nature of God. I do believe it reveals who he is and how he feels about the way that we respond to him first. Here's what he says. He says, when you bring your tithe, when you give first, he says, then I will open the windows of heaven for you. I will pour out a blessing so great that you won't have enough room to take it in. It'll overflow out of you. You will be this overflowing spring of water, not just in your life, but for everyone around you. And then he says this amazing thing. He says, try it. I know it doesn't seem normal. I know it seems backwards. I know everything in the world, everything in the culture is telling you, no, hog it. And he says, give it. Try it. Try it. How do you know until you tried it? And then he says this, nowhere else in Scripture does God tell me and you that we are to test him. But there's one single solitary thing, one thing that God feels so strongly about, one thing that God means earnestly more than anything else. He says, put me to the test in this. Try it. Try it. Try it. Why you got to keep your nose down being normal and losing when you could live the blessings of God? Try it. Try the blessings of God. What could happen? What could happen if God was pouring his blessings of flowing water into your life? When you look at your bank balance, does it feel like flowing water now? Or does it feel like a dry old rag? When you're looking at your financial picture in your life, does it feel like flowing water, or does it feel like a dry old rag? When you're writing your bills, hey man, April is coming, and we got to all pay our taxes. When you're writing out all your bills and you're paying your bills, does it feel like a flow of refreshing water, or are you just squeezing the last drops out of a dry old rag? Try it and see what God wouldn't do. Put him to the test on this and see how God wouldn't want to bless. Now, I wish I had time this morning to go into detail about how can you do that, how can you do it. But I've got something much better than I could do in a 5-minute breakdown on that. We discovered a few years ago, we stumbled into Dave Ramsey's Financial Peace University. It is an excellent, excellent course. It's a 10-week course that we have watched change lots of lives right here in our church. My wife and I went through it. I went through it twice because it was that good. It was that good. And Dave Ramsey will take 10 weeks in his course, and he will teach you how to properly put the big rocks in first in your life, and everything else just works out. I promise it is transformational. Now, it costs money. They just kicked the price up to $130. So it seems like it's expensive for a 10-week course. But my wife and I, we spent the money to join the class, and by the second week, we found $800 that we didn't even know we had. Was it worth it? That was just the second week. By the end of like the 8th week, we had about a $6,000 swing from where we had been to where we were. Holy cow, it was worth it. I mean, it's worth it. The money they charge for the class, we don't get a penny out of that. It's their cost, and they've kicked it up to $130. But we are offering that class again, starting in just another week or two. So I think it's on March 4th or March 6th is when the first one begins. And so you can go to right now, you can go to theorchard.life and you can sign up for that class. You can just sign up right now. And I'm begging you to invest for a return. Take what God has given you and make it work for the kingdom. And this is a great way to start. It's worth it. It's so worth it. Our church believes it's so worth it. Here's the deal. This morning, we got a deal for you. $130, we can't change that. That's Dave Ramsey's cost to us. But for the first 5 people that sign up for this class, the church will subsidize part of that, and you can sign up for $99. So it's worth it. Not only that, but we believe in it so strongly that our church, not Dave Ramsey, our church gives a money-back guarantee. So you get to the end of the 10 weeks. I promise, you get to the end of the 10 weeks, and if you feel like that hadn't been worth it for you, and you haven't made that money back tenfold, we'll give you your money back. Okay? We will just give you the church will eat the cost for you. Okay? That's how powerful it is, and I really believe in it. So I'm begging you. Don't stare at me blankly like that. Man, get on there and take advantage of one of those first 5 and sign up for that right now. Try it. Try it. Test God in this and see what he couldn't do. Here's that verse, Isaiah 58:11. The Lord will guide you continually, giving you water when you are dry and restoring your strength. You will be like a well-watered garden, like an ever-flowing spring. This is what he wants for you. In Proverbs 8, he says this, I have riches and honor, as well as enduring wealth and justice. My gifts, he says this, my gifts, the things I have for you are better than gold, and even the purest gold. My wages, what I have for you, they are better than sterling silver. I know you're not jumping in, you're not willing to try it, and that's because you think that what you got is better. But he's saying if you believe him and if you trust him, he's got something better for you. Proverbs 15:16. What is the first word of this verse? You are terrible at this. Okay, what is the first word of this verse? Better. God has for you better, and it's better to have little with fear for the Lord than to have great treasure and inner turmoil. This is normal. This is what everybody's doing. Normal is having more, but having lots and lots of debt choking you out. Better in the world's eyes is having more, but having a marriage that just isn't working anymore. In the world's eyes, better is having all the bling and looking good, but having inner turmoil and grief because you are being killed by the weight of it all. But what he has for you is better. What he has for you is peace. What he has for you is power. What he has for you is freedom from the chains of this world. He has something better for you. Try it. Believe it. Live it, and let him flow in and through you. It's not all about whatever makes you happy. It's about serving and glorifying him. Because, next blank on your page, his blessings are always better than mine. His blessings are always better than mine. He says he will open up the floodgates of heaven. Open up the floodgates of heaven, man. I'd rather have a little drop or two from the heavenly floodgates than have a full open bank vault for me to have access to everything. Because what he has is better. And my hope for you, my prayer for you, is that you'll be a follower of Christ who will always, last blank, trade up, not trade down. Trade up, not trade down.